Hello everyone, Voodoo here. So we're about, I don't know, like 10 weeks into the season now. And early on, there was a conversation between Toxic Thorn Footwraps and Blue Silken Lining as the embellishment of choice for Havoc Demon Hunter. Now, in Raid, I think the choice is still a pretty big toss-up. In Mythic Plus, it's a pretty clear choice, which is better. So in today's video, we're gonna do a bit of a deeper dive into the Raid side of things, so to speak, and just kind of look at which is actually better between Blue Silken Lining or Toxic Thorn Footwraps. And we'll touch a bit on Mythic Plus as well, although that one's a pretty open and shut case. So before we get to the video, make sure you like the video, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. We're pushing towards 10K, which is insane. And also check out this video's sponsor, G Fuel. They're an energy drink company. They sponsor me. Use code Voodoo at checkout or use the code in the description. They have some pretty good stuff. So with that out of the way, let's get into the video. All right, so first things first, let's just go over the embellishments. In case you don't know what they are, you're newer to the class, whatever. So the two real options we have, and I know if you go back and look at like the guide and stuff, I also talk about the Sport Cloak. That was just shot in the head behind the barn, so that's dead now, don't worry about that. But the two choices we do have are between Blue Silken Lining, which is this one here, which basically is an equip effect that whenever you're above 90% health, you get a ton of mastery. You get like 624, and those do stack. So I have two of them. You see here, the buff is 1249. When you first equip two of them, there might be a bit of a bug where that doesn't show up. If you do encounter that bug, just unequip both of them, re-equip, or just, you know, drop below 90% health and then go back above it, and it will kind of re-trigger there. So this gives a lot of mastery, and mastery is very good for Havoc because obviously it increases your chaos damage done, and we right now take any means necessary, which turns basically everything except for our melee attacks into chaos damage. So it's a pretty big amp to all the damage we're doing. It's really good in AoE or cleave, but its whole thing is that it's only up whenever you're above 90% HP. Now, that being said, you're above 90% HP more than you'd think, just because of how current like encounter designs or dungeons work. In a dungeon, you're gonna have this basically at the start of every pull. In raids, depending on the fight, you can have anywhere from, I think, 30-40% is the lowest, like 60% is the highest uptime of this, which is kind of funny. And obviously, you know, the stronger your healers are, the better Blue Silken Lining is. And, you know, in farm, it's probably gonna be a bit better as well because, you know the fights. But, you know, you're gonna have this up pretty often. Now, on the other side of things, we have the boots, or Toxic Thorn Footwraps as they're called. So what these do, and mine aren't fully upgraded, I need to get some more crests to do that, but that's happening basically today, I think. But what these do is they reduce your stamina by a bit, which is not a major deal, like very minor. And then they also just kind of cause your spells to launch thorns at your target, dealing damage and or healing, depending on what your target is. And these are actually doubled if you have the Toxic Armor patch, which is this down here. It's just, you just put it on another armor piece. It does count as embellishment, and it just kind of doubles the effect of the boots. The boots are a single target damage proc. These can proc on any target you hit, but like only once. So if you're in AoE, they can like strike random targets, not just your primary one. They can actually heal you if you take damage, which does cause them to oversim a bit. The trinket we use, Cataclysmic Signet Brand, can also cause these to heal you. So they do oversim a little bit, but they're a really strong, really good single target option. They have good stats in crit and haste, which is very solid for us. And the stamina, the minus stamina, isn't that big of a deal. So the whole discussion before now is kind of like, okay, which is better? Do you use BSL in single target and AoE? Do you use Blue Silken Lining in AoE and boots and single target? Do you change it up depending on cleave? And we're far enough into the season now where we have pretty solid data on like the breakpoints you need for BSL to be better, which bosses have good uptime, which bosses have better profiles for BSL versus Toxic Thorn. So we're gonna go hop over to some Warcraft logs and some sims and stuff, and we'll just break it down, different data points and different places where you might want to use each one. So first things first, just to kind of get it out of the way, we're going to do Mythic Plus. So this is a singular D-Slice sim, and this is going to be the only sim I talk about Mythic Plus for. And pretty much you can see here that this one here is kind of just with BSL, and this one here is with the Toxic Thorn Footwraps. And I've scaled up, I've put like sockets that I wouldn't normally have, and I've scaled up kind of things just to keep it kind of on an even playing field. Obviously, you know, like I don't want to have like stat changes impact it too much, but just using my own gear, so nothing obviously perfect. You know, I'm still missing some interesting and good trinkets. I have my snake. But in Dungeon Slice, Boots is behind. Now in Dungeon Slice, you can have really high uptime. Generally speaking, I sim in AoE with like 80 to 85% uptime because that's what you'll have in a dungeon. But Dungeon Slice is kind of the sim type that's always going to give Boots the best kind of shot because it prioritizes single target and low AoE so much. In high AoE, Blue Silken Lining is just going to blast Boots out of the water. There's just no comparison to it. I don't have a sim for it, but just take my word for it. There's just no comparison to it. On top of that, because Blue Silken Lining is while you're above 90% health, as you move from pack to pack, you're going to be at max health, right? The healer's going to heal you up. There's some cases like on bursting, or if there's like a weird dot or something where you might not be fully healed, and you know, obviously that can change things. But for the most part, majority speaking, you're going to have this effect when you go into a pack, which is when most of your damage happens, right? So it's just going to be best there. You're going to deal a ton of damage with the mastery at the start of each pull. You're going to just blast them out there. And it's worth noting as well that these don't have a stamina loss where the boots do. And this season, while the stamina loss isn't major, this season is one where it's like, hey, if you can kind of live stuff, then you will end up timing keys unless you're doing like really high things, then you do need a bit of both. But for the most part, for I think most people who watch this video, let's say 99.99%, the stamina is not really going to impact anything for you. But it can end up, you know, maybe killing you where you otherwise might survive on the very highest key. So it's worth noting that. But yeah, so Mythic Plus, Blue Silken Lining, just going to be better. Now, if we swap over to Raid, though, we do see some interesting things. So we're going to look at some logs first. All right, I lied. We're going to look at sims first because I think it's a bit of a better way. So I'm going to have a bunch of sims here, just at different Blue Silken Lining uptime. So this one here is 60% in a single target. You can see that Boots with Blue Silken Lining at 60% are 0.5 ahead. And now I did say that Boots do oversim a bit. So roughly around 60%, you would expect them to be about equal. Even at 55%, you know, 0.7%, I would say they're still about equal, and the difference is not very big. Like you can see here, even, you know, 60% Blue Silken Lining uptime, about the same. So I say if the magic number we're looking for here is roughly 50 to 55% uptime when they're going to start being roughly the same or better for Blue Silken Lining. You can see here at 50%, it's 1% ahead. And again, there is a bit of over simming on Boots' front. But if we go even lower, 45%, I'd say it's pretty clear that Boots is going to just be better. So again, the number we're looking for here is going to be roughly 55-ish%, 50 plus. And if you go under 50, I would say it's generally not going to be as good. Although this one's actually a little bit higher because of variance, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so those are kind of the sims there, 60 to 45%, which are kind of the most common things. Now, this doesn't account for any cleave or anything like that. Boots obviously are going to be worse than Blue Silken Lining on cleave, just straight out because of just how this works, right? Making your Havoc ability scale is going to be much better than just doing damage to one target. The damage difference is not enough to really matter. And on top of that, Toxic Thorn Footwraps cannot actually proc on shields, which is important to know. So absorb shields like Tindrill's Supernova Cast or Firax, I think it's Incarnate, whenever he in Intermission 1 with all the orbs going in, won't work there. So important to know that. Now, let's look through some logs here and look at uptime. So for most of this, I'll be looking at Shadowrex logs. He's a great demon hunter who I know has been using Blue Silken Lining the whole time. Then I have a Chinese demon hunter, I cannot say that, don't know what that means, who has killed Firax that we're going to look at there as well. So obviously we're going to start with Gnarl Root. The very first boss, very easy to look at. We scroll on down here, you can see Zone of Focus has a 65% uptime, which obviously would put it way ahead of Boots. The other thing to keep in mind here is Gnarl Root has adds and it has a damage amp phase. For both of those, Blue Silken Lining will be better because you're going to have that up during the damage amp phase because there's no like don't damage happening basically, and you're doing meta and you're leeching and stuff like that. And the adds, just cleaving, are going to do so much more for your overall with Blue Silken Lining. But obviously these first bosses don't really matter, right? Igara, we can look down, has 50% uptime, but there's lots of spear cleave here. The spears happen 25 seconds, 20 seconds, very often, right? So again, Zone of Focus at 50% uptime on a single target might not be great, but in AoE with this cleave, I would just use Blue Silken Lining here as well. Keep on scrolling down to Volcaros. Now here, we see that BSL is actually at like 51% uptime. At this point, it's against a single target. You could probably play it, but you could also just play Boots and probably be a little tiny bit better. But it doesn't really matter. Like, this is the third boss, and there's not really that much difficulty here. Excuse me. So, again, this one doesn't matter. You can play either. Now, first interesting one we come to is Laradar. Now, Laradar actually has a lot of damage going out, and I think just looking at this one log, something might have happened here during the intermission, just kind of in general towards the end here. But Blue Silken Lining's uptime is actually very low at 36%. Now, there's a few reasons for that, but at the start, there's a ton of uptime here, and I think Shad's parsing this is actually very good. You can see he hits kind of a crazy number at the start. But I do think this is one of those cases where having boots might be a bit better for single target, but you're going to lose a lot overall because you're losing that cleave damage. Most of the damage happens towards the later half of the fight, so you're not doing a ton in P2 or the intermission, I guess. But in P1, if you're trying to hit those treants and get like a good parse, then I think Zone of Focus will be very good. If you're progging this, Boots probably a bit better. Council is 2 targets the whole time, so even though Zone of Focus is really low, I wouldn't use Boots here, not really. I mean, you're fighting 2 targets the whole time, right? Or 2 to 3, I guess, depending on how good your tanks are at cleaving. I don't really think there's much point in using Boots here. Personally, just use the mastery. Nimue, I think is another interesting one because this is just a single target boss. There's no AoE or anything like that, but Zone of Focus is very high. It's at 55%. This is one of the higher uptime bosses the whole time. So again, here, I really don't think there's much of a reason to use Boots, even though this is another good Boots fight. Just the fact that the uptime is high, even though we're only fighting a single target, kind of makes a big deal. Finally, for this one, we got Smolder on. Here, I would just use the Boots. 47%, which is a pretty good guild here, is strong. You definitely have low uptime on this fight, and I do think that Toxic Thorn Boots will be pretty good. That being said, of course, there's a damage amp, right? You can see here, which, of course, Blue Silken Lining is good for. Now, we pull out here, we go to Tindril. We see uptime is at 45%. Again, here, just use Boots. You're here for root damage or for shield damage, and doing root damage, the Boots don't do anything for. Shield damage, the Boots can't proc on, so Blue Silken Lining here is just going to be way better. And finally, we have Farak. So this is an interesting one. So this guy uses 1 Blue Silken Lining, and he uses 1, if we go to damage done, he uses like the Toxic Boots. So it's kind of a bit of both. Now, that being said, Toxic Boots would do about 4% overall with the Toxic patch. They did roughly 2% here without it. But again, looking at buff uptime, 45% is nothing crazy. But if we look at where it's up, it's interesting. So once you hit P3, you have very poor uptime, like 30%. P1's not bad, not great, but then P2, you just have it up the entire time. So I think it's going to depend what your role is on this fight. If you're trying to do that single target damage and you need to kill the boss at the end, then obviously, right, the Boots are going to be helpful for you. The Zone of Focus does basically nothing in P3. But in P2 and the intermission with the shield, well, granted, Zone of Focus's uptime there won't be that high in the shield intermission. In P2, with all the ag cleave and all the damage you're not taking, you can see it's very high there. It's going to be very good for you. So it's going to come down to what you're really trying to do here. Personally, I'm thinking about doing like 1 and 1. Oh, I just realized my camera froze. 1 second. I'm thinking about doing 1 and 1. So having like a boot and a DSL here. Not fully sure if that's better or not, but even running 2 BSL I think is fine. So long story short, you really can just run Blue Silken Lining on every boss fight and do well. There might be a few different bosses where you kind of can edge out with Boots by like very minor amount. But if you're coming in and you're a newer player and you're trying to craft stuff, because it's better at Mythic Plus, because it's better on most of the fights in the raid, I would just play Blue Silken Lining. Now, if you wanted to craft Boots for like Smolderon or maybe Laradar or maybe Farak, then fine, go ahead. I'm going to do that with my Sparks and Crest soon. But I think generally speaking, the data shows that Blue Silken Lining kind of just a bit better, especially when you look at all the cleave in this raid. Now, in the future, like next patch, when we have a lot of the older raids coming back and there's a lot less cleave in some of them, like in Aberrus, then I do think Boots will be very good. So I think it's important to have both of them, but I do think that Blue Silken Lining is better in most cases. So that's gonna be the video today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know down below what you think, what you're using. You know, is it Blue BSL? Is it Toxic Boots? Whatever. Make sure you like the video, comment, and subscribe. Which is up towards 10K, and check out G Fuel. Thanks to her sponsoring the video. So with that, thank you everybody. I'll see you guys next time. Peace. A big thank you to all my channel members. Thank you Sky Elk, Fede Gregori, Andrew Kino, Guillermo Lamas, Period, Brad Wisniak, It's Bulk, Magic Man 133, and Howley. Thank you all so much. You guys are amazing, and I really appreciate the extra support. If you guys want to support me, consider becoming a channel member below. You get access to exclusive videos and some emotes to use in comments and stuff, as well as a special part of my Discord. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate it, everybody, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.